who come to events there. So great.
Yes. And every year we are seeing an increase in the number of ColdFusion developers that are coming to the events. Like you would have seen in even the Vegas event last year was bigger than the year before. And hopefully this year the Summit East is going to be bigger than what it was the last year.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Kishore Balakrishnan of Adobe. He's the marketing manager for ColdFusion, and we're going to be talking about Adobe ColdFusion Summit East 2019, and that's just happening in a few weeks' time in Washington, D.C. And we're going to tell you about all the exciting things happening there, all the speakers. We've got some news about Adobe that you may not have heard that we're going to tell you about. And also, there's an incredible deal, not only in the conference, which you won't believe how much the conference costs, but they also have a full day of ColdFusion training at an amazing price as well. So that and more in this episode. And if you have not met Kishore, he used to be a Java developer, and then he learned about ColdFusion and came to the light side from the dark. No, I'm just kidding there. But before he went into marketing, he actually programmed in ColdFusion. And you'll see him at a lot of conferences, and roadshow events. So welcome, Kishore.
Thanks, Michaela. It's always good to be back and talking to you.
Fabulous. So I'm excited. How many years has this event been going in Washington, D.C.? It must be like 4 or 5 years?
Yes, it's the 4th year that we are having this event. And if you remember, we started very small. The first event we had in D.C., we had close to 30 people who attended the event, and then it sort of grew to 100. Last year we had close to 200 people, and this year we are aiming to have more than 250 people attend the conference.
Wow. And how many people? I know it's a free event, letting the cat out of the bag there as to how much it costs, because I know people were listening in suspense, So, but, how many people have registered this year? When you say you think 250 will turn up?
We have close to 400 registrations as of now, and we are still 3 weeks out for the event to start. So we are expecting somewhere close to 500 registrations. And typically we see in ColdFusion around a 60% turn up. So give or take, we are expecting anything between 250 to 300 people at the event.
Right, you never can tell because the weather in Washington in April could be anything. So
we are hoping it's pleasant. Last time it was very pleasant.
Yeah, sometimes it's very nice. There's usually at least 1 week of spring in Washington, D.C. It goes from freezing cold to really too hot and humid. But if you're lucky, you get that 1 week where it's really pleasant. And then the cherry blossoms come out in the tidal basin. It's very beautiful at that time of year. So perfect timing for having the event.
Yes.
So why, help us understand, you have the big ColdFusion event in Las Vegas every year, CF Summit West. What's the purpose for having this second event?
The primary idea was that we have a cluster of customers on the East Coast and a cluster of customers on the West Coast. And we figured out after our second CF Summit in Vegas that it was not easy for people from the DC or from the West Coast to go to Vegas. So that's why we came up with the event in DC, so that we get to talk to people who are there in DC and the surrounding areas. And the reception had been good so far.
Yeah, it's a great, and of course, there used to be the Macromedia DevCon in DC many years ago, and then the CF United conference in the DC area. So, and then even CF Objective was in DC a year or two ago.
For 1 year, yes.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of ColdFusion developers on the East Coast who come to events there. So great.
Yes, and every year we are seeing an increase in the number of ColdFusion developers that are coming to the events. Like you would have seen in even the Vegas event last year was bigger than the year before. And hopefully this year, the Summit East is going to be bigger than what it was the last year.
So that's great, and that you're bringing CF summits to where the people are. And I know last year you even had one in India as well, where I know there are a lot of ColdFusion developers.
Yes. So last year in December we had this first ever ColdFusion Summit in India because we have a critical bunch of developers in India as well, and it's not easy for people to travel from India to US. So we had the first ever event in India at the Adobe office itself. And we had the whole engineering team there, and we had close to around 230 people who showed up for the India Summit.
Wow, that's impressive. Are you doing it again this year? Or?
Yes, we will definitely be doing it this year.
And then is there anywhere else in the United States or around the world where there's a large number of ColdFusion developers? Or?
There are a large number of ColdFusion developers in Europe as well. So that is another possibility that we are looking to see if we could have an event in Europe, or maybe there's CF Camp already in Europe. Maybe tie up with CF Camp to see if we could have a one-day event in Europe. But that's not in the cards for this year, but probably for next year.
Well, that would be very exciting news for folks in Europe, I know.
Yes.
So cool. And I know I saw some pictures on your Facebook where you'd been to Dev Week in San Francisco and talking about ColdFusion there.
Yes. So what we had realized is, we need to increase the awareness of ColdFusion among the typical developers who are coming out of colleges. So Developer Week is the largest developer conference in US. They had close to around 8,000 attendees who attended the event. This was in Oakland Convention Center. And we had a booth there, and Elisha had a couple of sessions as well, where she spoke about ColdFusion and the API management platform that we ship along with ColdFusion. And the reception was we were pleasantly surprised by the number of people who turned up, wanting to learn about what ColdFusion is. And some of them old-timers who used to work with the previous versions of ColdFusion, even they turned up and wanting to know more about ColdFusion. They had worked on version 3, 4, or 5, and they thought that ColdFusion was nowhere. We had stopped development of ColdFusion, and when we showed them the newer feature, they were really interested.
Yeah, I mean, you've been having a release roughly every 2 years for the last 23 years, I think. I mean,
yes, this is the 23rd
year. I've got the math a bit wrong there. So, ColdFusion never went. ColdFusion has improved a lot, and like someone said to me at the Into the Box conference, this is not your father's ColdFusion. That's a joke on it's not your father's Oldsmobile for those people who are not American. Just to say that if you only use ColdFusion in version 3 or even in version 8, or whatever, from 10 years ago, you're missing out on all the amazing changes that have happened in the language and also in the ecosystem around it, which I think is also impressive, because there's a lot of modern tooling that's used with ColdFusion, like Docker and Command Box and all kinds of other things that put it ahead of most other languages at this point.
So that is the point which we were trying to convey even at Developer Week, and a lot of the developers who are just passing out of colleges, they were really interested, which was heartening to see, because they wanted something. The core concepts of ColdFusion of being rapid application development platform, which does your security and your performance built in, that sort of draw the attention of the people over there who were in the booth. And we had a steady stream of traffic which came into our booth both the days. Hello?
Ding dong. Not sure what
Hey,
happened there. I
Mikala.
think my internet died.
Okay, no issues. I was thinking whether it's my problem or not, but I seem to have
Oh,
full
who knows?
connection. Yeah.
Okay. Whoops. All right.
No,
I
no big
paused
deal.
the recording, so I think we're going to be okay, but we'll find
Okay.
out. All right. Let's get my head together. So we've talked a bit about that. So I'm going to talk about why the conference is important, why, what people get out of it with you. So why should a developer come to a ColdFusion conference? Because some people listening may never have been to a ColdFusion event or
Yes.
conference, and are wondering, what is it that people get out of it?
For starters, you get to learn about the new improvements, new features that have been introduced in the latest version. And also you get to learn about what is the future roadmap going to be. As we had told repeatedly that we have a 5-year support policy that we have with any of the current releases, and we also would ideally like to tell people about our roadmap, get their feedback, and it's also a nice, great place for people to interact with the fellow ColdFusion developers. Last year at CF Summit East, this thing happened wherein there were like around 20 people who were sitting together chatting. And when I went in, they said like, hey, you know what? All of us work in the same building. And most of the times we rode the elevator together. We spoke about everything else, but we never spoke about what technology we worked in. And they came over there, they figured out all of them were working with ColdFusion. And they had formed a user group there right now, and they are meeting very regularly right now.
That's
So
great.
it's a mix of both. You get to know about the features, and it's also a great place for you to interact with the fellow ColdFusion developers. And obviously, at the summit, we have most of the Adobe staff as well. So it's also a great place for you to, if you have any issues, any queries, any support issues, we usually bring the support staff also along. So that would be a great place for you to come and tell us what the issue is. And most of the times we try to resolve it if we could, then and there itself.
Wow, that's an incentive to come all by itself.
Definitely.
And then if people have suggestions for improvements to ColdFusion, for new features for the future releases, you've got the upcoming ColdFusion 2020 release coming out.
Yes.
Can they talk to people about that too? Or?
Yes, Rakshat, the product manager, is going to be there. Ashish, who's the engineering director, he's also going to be there. And most of the staff from the senior levels in the ColdFusion team will be there. So he could, if we have any ideas, any suggestions, you feel free to come and talk to either of us, all of us.
That's great. That's a great opportunity to do that. I mean, I know you have the online place where you can submit suggestions for features, but there's
it's
nothing
better
like
to have a face-to-face conversation.
Exactly. So, so let's reveal what the speakers and topics are this year, because there's a lot of great speakers and looks like some really interesting topics you've got lined up. So looks like you've got Rakshit is going to be speaking.
Yes, Rakshit is going to be speaking. He's going to talk about the language enhancements that we did in ColdFusion, as well as what the future direction is going to be.
And he's the product manager for ColdFusion. So he's like he's where the person who decides, and organizes what features are in each release. Is that right? Or
yes,
yeah,
he's your guy. As you rightly said, if you have any feature suggestions, he's the guy to talk to.
All right, and he's giving a talk on geeking out with the smart language additions in ColdFusion 2018. And I must admit,
Yes.
there's been some really cool things added to ColdFusion 2018 with the security and performance and new language features. So a lot of
Yes.
new things to learn. I don't know if you could even learn all the new things in the hour he's got for his talk. There's so many new stuff in there.
He typically does a good job of it. He shows a lot of code snippets, and he shares those code snippets at the end of the summit.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And then Alicia will also be speaking as well. Alicia Dvorak, she's the ColdFusion solution consultant and evangelist and Adobe. And I think she's talking about performance monitoring. So there's a whole
Yes.
new set of tools in ColdFusion 2018 for monitoring your server.
So 2018 came up with the primary calling card for 2018 was around performance, and we introduced a suite of products around called the performance monitoring toolset to talk about wherein the users could monitor, manage your servers using ColdFusion performance monitoring toolset.
Wow, that sounds very useful to learn about. And then Charlie Earhart, long-term ColdFusion troubleshooter, and he's been speaking for years at different conferences on ColdFusion. He's a real expert, and he's doing an update of a talk he's given before. It's all totally new material, but it's the hidden gems inside ColdFusion 2018.
Yes, Charlie has actually spoken on all the ColdFusion summits that we had till now, both in East and West, and you would have seen him in most of the other conferences as well. I know I had seen Charlie at all the CF objectives I'd been to. I'm not sure about NC-DevCon, but I think he should have been speaking in NC-DevCon as well. And Into the Box, I'd seen him a couple of times in Into the Box as well. So, and in CF Camp, yes, in Europe also. People had seen him in Europe also. So Charlie as a speaker is well known, and his talk about hidden gems is something which I would never miss.
Yeah, because he kind of goes through all the release documents and all the details in there, and even some things that sometimes aren't fully documented. And he brings them out and explains how you could use them. So even people who've been using ColdFusion 2018 for 6 months since it came out, you might be amazed what's in there that you haven't learned about. So
definitely
great talk. And then turning to ColdFusion security, and I did a post recently on LinkedIn showing that ColdFusion's one of the most secure languages out there. And you've got ColdFusion security expert Pete Freitag, and he's going to be talking about securing mature ColdFusion code. So tell us a bit about that.
So Pete has been giving this talk about, most people have CF11, CF 2016 servers still running. So Pete and CF10 as well in some cases.
They do. That's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to let people know CF10 went end of life last year. That means no more hotfixes for CF10. Forget about CF9, 8, 7, anything else old. They're not getting hotfixes easier. And what that means is if a hacker finds a security issue in one of those old versions, they could get in. There would be nothing you could do. And then CF11 goes end of life on April 30th, I think, if I read it right. So you've only got like a few weeks left before your CF11 is end of life. So anyone listening who's running CF11 or older really needs to update their ColdFusion.
Most of them do update. So Pete's session talks about how you could secure your old mature databases and systems through the series of steps that he tells. And the good thing is Pete is also doing a hands-on session on security. If you have not done Pete's session on security, that's one of the must-dos hands-on sessions, because Pete does an amazing job wherein he goes through one scenario after the other, and he gives you example files on how you could exploit the security vulnerabilities that is there already, and how you go about, preventing them from happening. And Pete is an excellent speaker.
He is. Well, we'll talk a bit more about those pre-conference full-day training
Mm-hmm.
sessions further on. But yeah, I think those are important to do. So, and security is really important. I mean, there's so many sites that have had security breaches. So, I think particularly for federal government customers, that's a very key important thing for ColdFusion.
Yes.
So Brian Klaas, he's going to be speaking. He's from Johns Hopkins University, and he's going to be talking into going serverless with ColdFusion on AWS, Amazon Web Services. So tell us a bit about that. That sounds like a very modern thing to be doing.
Yeah, so Brian Klaas has been, working with AWS and ColdFusion for quite some time. And, he normally gives this talk about, how to move your things onto the cloud. And if you want to set up a server or Docker cluster on cloud, how to go about it. It's like how to get started with the serverless environment on AWS. And he talks about the step functions, how you could orchestrate your functions and services within the AWS cloud. So if you're planning on moving to AWS cloud, or even if you just want to learn about how to migrate your systems onto AWS cloud, this is one of the must-attend sessions. And usually we had this session once at CF Summit in Vegas. We really well appreciated this session. And Brian Klaas is an amazing speaker.
He is. I've interviewed him on the podcast, and he's very knowledgeable and friendly. And, for people who haven't examined deploying to the cloud, there's a lot of benefits to doing that, just from a scaling and reliability point of view. But in particular with Amazon's cloud, they have like a zillion extra features that you can call on, like, facial recognition and translating stuff and all kinds of, I don't know if I want to call them AI, but there's some really clever things they have in there that you can, if you're running on their cloud server, you can just pull into your application. So, and you of course don't have to code that stuff because they're doing it for you. So
definitely
great stuff. And then I know a lot of people are concerned about their database code, because the number one reason we see in the state of the ColdFusion unit is a survey for slow apps is that it was nothing to do with the ColdFusion. It was all to do with the SQL code.
Exactly.
So you've got Eric Cobb, who's a database development manager, and he's going to be talking about faster queries. I know that's a lot of interest to a lot of people.
Yeah, well, what we had seen is most of the times whenever someone says my website is performing slowly, most of the time it boils down to, your database interaction. If you're interacting with the database, it normally boils down to, how you've written your select statements or your stored procedures, or whether you indexed your tables correctly. And so I think Eric Cobb does a good job of, going through that and telling people what are the must things that you need to worry about.
That's great. So, if you've got any concerns about your database, definitely recommend seeing that session.
Exactly.
I can see already that given that you've got 2 tracks, some people are going to have a little bit of a challenge here.
Yes.
Deciding which ones to go to.
So what we are trying to do is we are trying to see if we could record all the sessions and put it out.
Oh, that would be fabulous. That way people, if they miss something, or even if you attend a session, sometimes it's nice to watch the recording and you learn stuff you kind of missed when they're in person. So, or to share back with your team. So, that's fabulous that you're doing that. Now, turning to the front end, to the UI, Giancarlo Gomez, he runs the ColdFusion user group down in South Florida.
Yes.
And he actually was the first person I interviewed on the CF Live web's podcast.
Oh, nice.
A few years back. Anyway, he's talking on refreshing your UI, modern uses for WebSockets. So tell us a little bit about that and why people might want to use WebSockets.
So basically what he does is in Giancarlo's session, you will learn about, how easy it is to implement WebSockets inside your application. And he normally goes through sort of real world uses of that WebSockets. And also he gives you some tips and tricks to help you help the customers get them up and running on using WebSockets.
So WebSockets are a kind of way of having two-way communication from your app server.
To make it more responsive, as well as, instead of picking on refresh buttons, if your page is going to load slow, I use WebSockets to see how you could make it run faster.
And one of the, I don't know if he's going to show this in his talk, but, one of the common apps is like having a chat app.
Yes.
That pops up inside your application.
Yeah.
But there's all kinds of other things you can do with it, because you can push messages from the server back to the, web page and have it update things. So cool stuff. Now, speaking of modern UI, React JS is one of the common ways people do one of those interactive front ends. The other ones being Vue, JS, or Angular. So using ColdFusion with React is what Min Vo is going to be talking about. And I met Min at CF Summit West last year, and I think he was new to speaking there. And so now he's a veteran speaker. I heard his talk went really well, actually. So
his talk went really well. And Min is sort of guy who gets really excited, and he spreads the charm around, and he's a very nice guy to be sitting around with, because he takes most of the conversation himself. So it was really nice having Min come up last year. And if you haven't seen the video that he did about his session, I will strongly
why don't you give me the link after we get off the call? I'll add it into the show notes, because it's
sure, definitely. So it normally gives you a preview of what Min is going to talk about. And unfortunately, I was not able to attend Min's session last year, but this time I'll definitely attend it. I heard a lot of good things about how he spoke about parallel scroll handling, simple animations, those sort of things that you could leverage, and how you could interact between ColdFusion and React.js components, and how you could build some really cool apps. I think the video he put about was about the animated thing which was running around.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And, for people who haven't done React or Angular or Vue, it's like a front-end JavaScript framework. And ColdFusion is really good at working with these, because you can, provide the JSON information from a ColdFusion CFC just with a few lines of code. It's very easy to interact with these front-end frameworks from ColdFusion.
Yes.
So let's turn a bit back to the back end for a moment, and a kind of what I want to call it, until recently, it was like a bit of a secret feature in ColdFusion Enterprise, which is the Adobe API Manager. So many apps, now use API. It's just like when they're working with React, or they're working with other applications within the enterprise, and they have to communicate through APIs, either receiving them or generating those APIs. And, I know that there can be a lot of problem with, is the API being overused, or do you have to meter it, or, are you doing some kind of versioning control? So this API manager is the answer to that. And it's been out for, I guess, more than 2 years now. But anyone who's using APIs in their enterprise really should look at using that. And it comes included with ColdFusion Enterprise. And Brian Zappi, who's the application architect at Market America, he's going to be talking on that. So tell us a bit more about his session.
So Market America is one of the very first customers who adopted the API management platform that we came out in 2016. Actually, even before that, when we were in the beta phase itself, they started interacting with our development team to work closely to see what are the things that they needed. And I think they were one of the first customers who went live on production with the new API management platform. We have already done a case study with Market America where they replaced layer 7 as the API with ColdFusion for the API management platform. So that shows the value add that ColdFusion brings in for its enterprise customers by just adding a product which is being sold. I think in the case study, if I remember correctly, Market America said that they have saved close to, I think, $40,000 per year by replacing layer 7 with the ColdFusion API management platform. So in this talk, if you see, Brian Sappi normally talks about what are the hidden features that you should be looking for, and how, if you are migrating from an existing platform, what are the things that you should look for, and how to automate your workflows and integrate with other third-party sites, which is typically the way most of them create their APIs.
Wow. And then the last breakout session is by Luis Majano of Auto Solutions, and he's going to be talking about revamping your monolith ColdFusion app with hierarchical MVC, model view controller. So tell us a little about Luis and his session.
I don't think so. I have to say anything about Luis, because anyone who has worked with ColdFusion even for a couple of years would not have known Auto Solutions and Luis. They would have used some of his frameworks, some of his tools. Whether knowingly or unknowingly, they would have interacted with Auto Solutions. So, and Luis is again one of the few speakers who had spoken in almost all the CF summits. I think barring one, I think he was there in all the summits. And Auto Solutions usually have a couple of 4 or 5 guys who are there at all the summits. You know, Brad, he's there in most of the summits. And in this session, I think Luis typically talks about, how architecture behind the HMDC and how do you create a RESTful application that is modular and scalable. And how to, he also looks at, how to containerize them and deploy it on Dockers.
Now, there's one speaker we haven't talked about, and that's the keynote speaker. And that's Atish Garg, if I'm saying his name right.
It's Ashish Garg,
Ashish Garg, okay, got it down. And exciting news about him. He just got a promotion, right? He's now the engineering director responsible for the whole of ColdFusion.
Ashish Garg has been engineering director for quite some time. Now he has taken over ColdFusion as well. So Ashish Garg is a director of engineering for the e-learning products, which include Captivate, Director, I think, and now he has Connect as well, Adobe Connect as well. And he has taken over ColdFusion, the engineering responsibilities of ColdFusion. And for folks who remember Jaren, Ashish was in the Jaren team as well. And Ashish has been with Macromedia. Then as part of the merger, he came to Adobe. So he's a veteran at Adobe.
Yeah, I think I met him in Vegas last year. He was out there with the team then. So, and he'll be talking about what in the keynote?
He'll be talking about the state of ColdFusion, and Ashish also has a new product which they have developed from scratch called Captivate Prime. It's an LMS. What we are planning on doing is talking about what are the challenges he faced building an enterprise class application, and how he went about solving them. And also he'll talk about what the future of Adobe ColdFusion is going to be. What are the features that we are looking at implementing in 2020? And also what we are planning on doing is, as usual, bring in a couple of customers who will talk about their journey using ColdFusion.
That was one of the great parts of the keynote in Vegas, where you had the guy from NASA telling us about how they have focused on using ColdFusion for a lot of their software and how it powers some of these amazing space missions they do. So it's very inspiring stuff there. So let's before we come back to the pre-conference training, which there's some very exciting stuff there, let's talk about some of the details of the conference. So when exactly is the conference? What's the date?
The conference is on April 10th. It's a Wednesday at Hotel Renaissance in DC, Washington, DC.
So it's downtown DC on 9th Street near the metro.
Yes, it's very close to the metro station.
Maybe about 5 blocks away from the White House, if you have some idea of the geography of Washington, DC and the National Mall.
Okay. I will let you be the judge of it because I have no clue about it.
We have to get you out of the hotel this year.
Hopefully.
Sure, so you can see at least some sights of Washington, DC.
Yes.
Yeah.
This time at least.
And then the conference runs from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And includes breakfast, lunch, and breaks, coffee, snacks, and things.
Yes, it includes
everything. Includes everything. So you got all these amazing speakers, all this knowledge and networking and food, wonderful location. And how much does this cost for this conference?
Around $1,000. What do you say? No, it's free.
It's free. Yeah,
it's free.
So amazing opportunity to learn a lot of ColdFusion.
Yes.
Meet a lot of interesting people in the ColdFusion world. And then let's talk about the pre-conference training workshops. So that's full day training. You've got 2 options here. Tell us about the 2 different options you have in the full training day.
So the pre-conference sessions are on April 9th. And as you said, it's going to be from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And we have 2 options. One is the security workshop, which is given by Pete Freitag. And the other one is the Angular and CFML workshop by Nolan Erck. So in the security workshop, Pete walks through, how to fix and find and fix the security vulnerabilities in your ColdFusion code bases. And basically, he talks about what are the red flags that you need to look for in your code and how an attacker is able to exploit the vulnerabilities. And the second one is an Angular and CFML workshop. It's done by Nolan Erck. Nolan is also one of our regular speakers in all the events. And he does a lot of training on JavaScript and other stuff. So Nolan gives this training on Angular and CFML workshop. Angular is one of the most popular JavaScript frameworks that we have till now. And in this workshop, what he'll do is he'll start off by saying how to build apps with Angular and basically get started with Angular. Then he'll also show you ways in which Adobe ColdFusion could create the server-side APIs and use Angular as a front end for it.
Sounds
so
like
looking
that's
at modernizing your web application. I think this is one of the must go to.
Yeah, I was going to say it sounds like a really modern way to code. Yeah, the way he's talking about in his workshop. So if you haven't picked up some of the modern coding techniques, that sounds like a great thing to attend. And then you just bring your own laptop to this. Yes. I guess you need to make sure you've got ColdFusion on your laptop and maybe a few other things. And,
what we normally do is we send all the prerequisites like 3 or 4 days before the event. And it takes hardly like 1 hour or 30 minutes of setup time. Or if you don't have the time, you could come like 1 hour before the event starts, and we have some people over, teaching assistants over there who could help you set up.
Great. And then, usually I know a day of training where it's like a hands-on class like this, it's got to be at least $500 a day. How much are these one-day trainings going to be?
$99.
What? That's like incredible. And that's in DC. I mean, it must cost at least that to pay for the space in the hotel. So it's like a great deal to learn hands-on from these ColdFusion
Yes.
experts, Pete and Nolan. And then I know on the Thursday and Friday after the conference, there's some post-conference workshops that Autis is doing. So they're
Yes.
doing the cold box from zero to hero training. I think it's like 2 minutes away from the Regis Hotel.
Yes.
So,
they're doing a 2-day event. I think they normally do this zero to hero workshop. If I remember correctly, it's a 2-day event.
yeah, and it's all about learning their cold box framework, so
Yes.
which is for ColdFusion. So another modern way to code in ColdFusion, and that one's $899. So I think it's a bit more hands-on, and maybe they didn't have the Adobe marketing budget to help out because it's an independent event. And I just want to appreciate, you and Adobe because this spent when it's free for the attendees. I know it's not free for Adobe, so appreciate all the time and money that Adobe puts in flying all their staff from wherever you're coming from, probably from India and California.
Oh, we are more than happy to do that. It's this thing of giving back to the community and getting to meet our customers. It's one way of for us to meet our customers, to talk to them and find out what they really need.
And then tell us a bit about how ColdFusion has been doing in the last year. You had a big release with ColdFusion 2018 back in October.
So ColdFusion has been doing really well. Years in terms of bookings and revenue for ColdFusion. 2018 was really great, and 2019 we had hit the ground running for 2019 as well. So this is turning out to be another blockbuster year.
That's great, and we're already nearly a quarter of the way through 2019, and ColdFusion 2020 is coming out next year.
Yes.
So lots of exciting stuff.
Yes, and also we'll be talking about what are the new stuff which is going to come out in 2020 in the keynote as well.
Oh, okay, exciting. Do you know when the beta starts for the ColdFusion 2020?
I don't have the date with me right now, but I could send it across to you.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. And it's an open beta, so anyone who wants to take part in that and wants to try out those new things in ColdFusion 2020 will be able to do so. So
yes, definitely.
All right. So let's just wrap up with some questions I ask all people on the podcast. Firstly, why are you proud to use ColdFusion and to be working with it?
Well, I told you about my story last time itself. ColdFusion has been one of the few languages which I picked up when I was doing my undergraduation, and fell in love with it at that time. This was 1998 that I was talking about, if I remember correctly, and this was in our college lab. And at that time, creating a simple website itself was a huge thing, and if that website could interact with the database and show the result, that was even fantastic. So that's when I fell in love with ColdFusion. And after joining this team, I'd seen how passionate the customers are with ColdFusion, and also what are the new advances that the engineering team is working on. And I've been proud to, acting as a conduit between our customers and the engineering team. So it has really been an amazing journey.
That is amazing. It's great that someone who looks after the marketing of ColdFusion understands some of the technical stuff within it and has that technical depth in your career. So let me turn to the penultimate question, which is, some people have said ColdFusion is dying, and I think we've shown that that's not the case, both with this podcast and the book I published, ColdFusion Alive. And just all the great news coming out from all corners of the ColdFusion community. But my question for you is, what would it take to make ColdFusion even more alive this year?
I think from a community perspective, if we could get around the fact that this is something which we are working on to see to it that ColdFusion is seen everywhere. When I say ColdFusion is seen everywhere, what I actually meant is, if there's some new technology which is coming up, and if they have code snippets on, how do I go about doing it? And if we could add the ColdFusion code snippets in there as well. Now that is one short way of people to getting to know that ColdFusion is still there. And ColdFusion being relevant is something which would be addressed by that.
That sounds a great thing to do. So tell us, what are you looking forward to at CF Summit East?
Are you talking about the one in Vegas or in DC?
No, the one in East, ColdFusion Summit East. What are you looking forward to in the event coming up in a few weeks?
I wanted to meet a lot of new customers, and you wouldn't believe, I think 68%, according to the last count, were new people who had registered. So it'll be interesting to see new accounts, new people in the team, and find out what they're up to and how we could help them. And obviously see some sites in DC this time around.
Yeah, we've got to get you out of the hotel this time. There's so many sites, and we didn't mention that during the interview, but I mean, there's the National Mall with all these free museums there. There's all kinds of other museums like the Spy Museum, and there's all kinds of parks and beautiful stuff. There's also, if you want to see the White House or Congress, you can, see those. I think you have to arrange to get a tour of those ahead of time, but you can certainly see from the outside for free without having to pre-arrange it. And then all kinds of restaurants and nightlife in Washington, D.C. as well. I know myself that there's the whole H Street corridor where there's a lot of jazz and other music, and then there's U Street. So a lot of amazing things to see and do in DC if you're there for a few days from outside the area. So great. Well, we'll put all the links to the CF Summit East in the show notes, which you can find at the TerraTech website, and also those other things we mentioned during the call we'll put into the show notes as well. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks, Michaela. It's always a pleasure talking to you.